So, what I wanna bring up is, what about you guys thinking about doing the same thing Cloverleaf did? Cloverleaf had almost exactly the same 2.5 million, and they reduced their millage 2.2. Now, when they did that, they came to the auditor, and I was at that meeting, and they were saying in their board and telling their group, well, we're gonna reduce taxes, and I told them, be careful about saying that. It was before they knew what they were gonna get for the revaluation revenue. And they said, well, this will save them 2 million. And I said, okay, but what about your revaluation? Maybe that comes up higher than what you're decreasing your millage by. And then I'm gonna sit on tax bills and they're gonna say, wait a minute, they said our taxes were gonna go down. Well, that's exactly what happened. They were gonna go 3.3 and they went to 2.2 mils over 3 levies, I think, wasn't it, Kristen? And they reduced it by that, which is about 2 million. They got 2.5 million in increased revenue from the revaluation. And so they're still $500,000 ahead. But you know what? That 2.2 they reduced really helped the taxpayers in that district. Why don't you guys think about doing that?
Well, can I?
With your extra revenue?
Can I, well,
Just a question.
if we don't have extra revenue if you look 5 years out. Let me explain this. They have a unique revenue stream, as you know.
They do, they have Nexus.
They have a Nexus
Yes,
pumping
they do.
station. And they also have something that we don't as well. Brand new high school, brand new middle school, brand new elementary school, brand new stadiums. They don't have the capital needs that we have. They're trying to take care of the facilities and replace 70-year-old facilities and make sure the kids have a warm, safe, and dry place in the school. And give them opportunities so they can compete in the world. If we had everything Cloverleaf had, I would happily give tax dollars back, but we are not there. And I will challenge you to find 10 more school districts in the state of Ohio give the tax dollars back. It doesn't
Well, it's
happen.
not the
It's
norm,
rare.
I can tell you
Yeah,
that.
exactly. I wish we were able to do that, but we have conflicting goals. If we were to, our one goal is to give tax dollars back, and the other goal is to improve our facilities, they're conflicting. And considering the shape of our facilities, our board has chosen the higher priorities to take care of our facilities. I'm just being honest.
I appreciate that.
Unfortunately, the state has determined, the Department of Tax and Equalization has determined that March 20th is when they're gonna let us know how they're gonna apply all these reductions, which doesn't make much sense to me. That's the time they've decided to do.
Why are we having a conversation?
Because they have to.
The bill was signed on December
Yeah.
19th.
Yeah.
The law goes into effect March 19th.
Right.
So March 20th,
Right, but they should be giving us guidance. This is an internal thing.
I wish we had guidance.
I would be very,
Yeah.
I would be very appreciative of that.
You're talking about hospital at 186, right?
Yeah, which is
a
what is gonna
credit,
affect
a tax
Medina.
credit
Yes,
for those underneath the 20 million floor.
Correct.
And we don't know what that's gonna do.
correct.
And if they include our emergency levy into our tax levy, we're above the 20 million.
But I will say, from my understanding, is that credit will be hitting our second half tax bills. I got off the state site just what it was for different school districts, approximately on the median home value. Okay, so let me get Buckeye. Okay, Buckeye, they had the home value, the median home value was $305,800, and they had the savings for the whole year that might hit second half taxes at $127 for that
Yeah.
individual, for a home of that value. So not a huge thing, but I also understand that you're not gonna lose that new revenue because the state is gonna reimburse the schools for that credit out of the August sales tax holiday fund.
Is that just for reappraisal years 24, 23?
That's for this year. Well,
I know,
25,
But I thought it was only applying that credit to people who reappraised in 23 and 24. Since we were reappraised in 25, we won't get it.
I'm not sure that.
There's some murkiness behind that, and that's one of the things we're waiting for
Okay.
the state to answer. But on that side,
I
on
would
the
be
other
surprised
side.
at that because they're gonna go back and give credit for the 3 years for the people that had it done in 23. They're gonna give credit for the one that got it done last year, us.
Far be it from me to question the value.
They're
It was in
gonna
the state,
try
that's
to
the law.
pay for everybody's, is my
If-
understanding. I think that's our responsibility, is to question the overall intellect of our legislators, and I think they're
Well,
lacking in some of the issues right now,
that's
quite
a
frankly,
debate for-
and I would
that's
put that
something-
on a public record.
But the point is, I have to use the law they're throwing at me, I'm trying to do the best I can
Yes.
to figure out what we're gonna get.
Now,
I'm just trying to take care of our community.
Now, House Bill 335 won't go into effect for Medina until 28, pay 29. So some tax
The
credit.
budget commission has to index.
335,
Yeah.
yeah, for the reappraisal, when the new reappraisal comes. Medina is staying on the same schedule. There are some counties that are switching schedules,
I don't either, because the door's
but
open.
I think that, you know, I'm the non-accountant in the room, okay? But I think that your task is more difficult than our task.
Well, sure.
And we're all trying to figure all these changes out on the fly. Where we sit here in February was different where we sat in January, was different where we sat in July. We've got vetoes and all that stuff that you know as well.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, I don't know how any of us do it perfectly.
But, and I'm gonna speak only from my personal bent, if you will. My grandfather always said, you don't build a church for Easter. And it makes sense to me. And what I wanna do, and quite frankly, I have had this conversation with my co-board members. I don't wanna waste my time, I don't wanna waste your time. I don't wanna sit through a sales pitch. I wanna be able to have real numbers that we can really evaluate to get a clear picture of what our school districts are doing, because I want just exactly what you want. I want safe, I want dry, I want warm, I want appropriate. I even understand some level of competitive. Okay? I absolutely have that. But I also understand we have 186,000 people in this county that are paying property taxes and are getting held to a stranglehold, and something's gotta give.
I understand it as well.
And you know what? And it's difficult, and I'm sorry, but it's far more difficult for folks once they no longer have children in school to understand how millions and millions of dollars are going to school districts for fancier buildings and more Wi-Fi and bigger classrooms, all of those issues, all of which are nice, and they're wonderful, but they come at a cost. And who's paying that cost? Not the school administrator, not the administration. And as John has already said, I think your taxpayers have spoken very loudly that they're reaching a tolerance level. And that's my honest opinion.
I understand. I'd like to just, you know, comment on some of that. If you come to Buckeye, right, you will see that we don't have oversized classrooms.
I have been
You will see
Buckeye.
that, right. So, again, I understand the position. Our position, and our position with our Board of Education was, how can we use the resources that we have to improve our facilities, not to build fancy, to build appropriate, to build for the next 30 to 50 years, which is what you do when you go to school, right?
Sure.
And to not ask the taxpayers for more money, because as we have asked the taxpayers for more money historically, operationally, and for one, and we have not been successful. Okay? The other reality is if we don't have a plan in some fashion, okay, I've gotta have a plan for that junior high school. I have to.
Sure.
I have to have a plan for that high school, that you mentioned competitive. I don't know that Buckeye High School, from a facility perspective, is competitive. Okay, I don't know. Okay, I've got some opinions on that, but I think we can do better with this, right? So if we go to new high school, maybe that does put our high school kids in a better spot. Also, maybe it does make us more competitive, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Okay, it also takes care of our junior high school and middle school kids.
And what I'm saying is it's always a balancing test.
Sure.
Okay, so as an example, what were our student needs, what were our classroom needs in 2024? We had 2,246 students under enrollment, excuse me, that was 23, I apologize. And I'm kind of moving forward. We had an enrollment in 2023 of 2,246 students, according to these numbers.
Right.
In 2026, we had 1,952. Those are, I'm assuming, since it's 26, it's projected, or it's represented in here, that's actual numbers. And I'm not saying every student, every head was counted. I'm not saying that. What I do know is this, that's a reduction of 294 students. How many teachers did we reduce during that time period?
During that time period, probably not too much, because from a staffing perspective, we were pretty lean. Okay? And we also, as you project out staffing, you're looking at the rules that you have at that time, you are certainly projecting what you can do with staffing. There's never in staffing, do you want to hire somebody in whatever position, from a bus driver all the way to an administrator, unless you feel that that position is going to be there for years, right? You don't want to hire somebody and then a year later have a risk.
No, I understood that.
Right? So every year that you come into staffing, you look at attrition. So every year, when you have retirements are usually at the higher end of salary and at higher end of benefits, medical, right? You always ask, does this position have to be filled? Can it be filled through attrition if it has to be filled? And if you have the ability to hire, you are more than likely hiring in at a much significant lower cost, right?
Would you agree with me that staffing is probably, when you look at your overall budget, that's probably your biggest expense? It certainly is mine.
Personnel and
Personnel.
80%.
All, yeah, 80%. So 80% of your revenues go to that.
80% of the cost.
Oh, excuse me, allocation. When, and I don't know whether your staffing was appropriate in 2023, but I know we're 3 years later and we have 294 fewer students. My guess is when we were drawing up the plans for a high school, what was our student body anticipated, what was our projection for student bodies when we were drawing up the plans for a school as far as capacity?
Sure. So our student-teacher ratio at our elementary schools is higher than at our high school. Student-teacher ratio right now at the high school is between 13 to 1, 14 to 1. Okay, that's low. It is. We know that. And that's something as we project out in relation to staffing, that's something.
I mean, 13 students per teacher, is that?
Yeah, that's low. Now, not every class has 13 kids in it. You're gonna have one with 25, you're gonna have one with, okay, so that's our high school. It is. 13 to 1 is low. So now
I don't know.
yeah,
Okay.
from our elementary, they're much higher than that. All right, so that tells us as we're looking at staffing, and if we have the opportunity, if we have people that are leaving the district, right, we certainly are gonna have to look at, do we bring back teachers at the level where the student-teacher ratio is much lower, right? But that's a tricky balance, right? So what does a student-teacher ratio for kindergarten at I'm making numbers up, 20 to 1 at a kindergarten versus 20 to 1 at sixth grade are two very different things because of the maturity of the kids, because of the needs of kids. But staffing, because it's 80 to 90% of our need, right, from a financial perspective, it always has to be.
And quite frankly, gentlemen, that's why I was trying to move us forward. Because we could get mired down on capital improvements for a week. And I don't wanna do that. I wanna move this forward for you as well as for us.
The big reason we focus on capital improvements, which we probably won't do next year because we don't plan it, we had the 133%, but we wanted to demonstrate how we're using it for the benefit of our community. That was the big reason we pushed it on.
No, and I appreciate that. And look, we all know that capital improvement is a vital part of every school district, okay? It has to be addressed, whether it be maintenance, whether it be improvement, whether it be renovation, whether it be replacement. I understand that. I am not suggesting that we all just ignore that aspect of it. I'm saying, as I said just a few moments ago, it's a balance. And the question that I feel that we have to have answered is whether or not that balance is being properly projected in your numbers so that we can make a determination within the guidelines of the statute about the millage aspect of those levies. That's what my goal is. This is not an attack on your school district, and I promise you I'm going to have just as difficult questions except for the meetings that I'm not going to be at, which I'm sure
you now wish was this one.
No,
Which is okay.
I'm not feeling attacked at all.
This is
You
good.
guys have the right to ask these questions.
Answer, actually, it's good to understand, you understand what we're doing, also understand what you're looking for from us.
Well,
So it's good.
and that's why I said, and I'm not gonna mince words, I don't want a sales pitch, I'm not trying to buy a new car, okay? I don't want puffing, that's a legal term if you didn't know what that was.
Didn't know.
You didn't? No,
I
look up Ford.
hope you don't feel we're doing that.
Well, no, but I'm saying, to answer your question, puffing was a advertising technique that was used to make products look better than they were. Ford got sued for it, because the way they represented their pickup trucks, and they won, because the court said, well, no, that's when they came up with the term puffing.
I'm a former history teacher. I knew what nothing was.
There you go.
Mark, what's your average, service time per teacher?
Right now,
Yes.
well, I honestly don't know, but it's somewhere around 16, 17 years.
It's better. It's under 20 years.
Under 20?
Yeah.
We're entering negotiations, and we're doing a lot of stuff with staffing and numbers and.
What was the
schools
cost,
are
what was the
retiring, but I
cost
can't
per
remember
student
that.
again? I just read it a minute ago. The cost per student?
I got it on this sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Right
looking.
here, and
16.
it varies, and if you take the general fund, it really varies quite a bit
14.
because of, like, last year's expenditure.
Right.
On maintenance, but it goes from 10,000,
To 6.
570, 11,060.
Yeah, if you take out 25 and 26 because of the major transfers, right, that's why I highlighted those expenses. It's 10, 11,000 per student. I have it projected in 27, 28 to go up higher. But
That's
not the same expenses.
Again,
as lower.
substantially higher, and we really expect it to be that much higher,
The cost
15 and
was-
16,000 versus 10 to 11.
I'm not sure I understand what I'm looking at, I apologize.
These,
What the hell is a carryover cash balance carryover per student? Is that like a reduction in the allocation that you're anticipating for each student? I'm not sure what I'm looking at.
you know what? I was asked to provide these details, and therefore I did. I took our carryover balance and divided by our number
Okay.
of kids.
Okay,
It was a math.
Essentially, it's how much money they have left,
Extra.
extra, divided
Reserve.
by the number of students, so to let you know that
And
they're,
And it takes that big dip because they moved 32 million.
Right,
from
they moved it out of the
general
general,
fund out to
yeah.
there, yeah.
okay, so I understand that aspect of it.
That's really kind of goes with what I was talking about in their reserve balance being 120, 130% until they move that money.
I don't want anybody to see this number, I don't want
So let
students
me
coming
ask
out
you-
saying, hey, I saved you this money, I want it.
On that thought, what do you think the average percentage should be for reserve for your general fund?
It depends, but it's
Yeah, 10,
around
20, 30,
40%. 40%'s quite good.
40%.
I'm more comfortable with a little bit extra just because when you get into July and you finishing up the year, paying down bills, and you gotta get payroll going for next year, make sure you have enough to get you through July and August. But I don't like being down. My minimum is what I'm more worried about than the maximum. I'm more worried about having at least 3 months of cash on hand.
Your preference is 40%.
Yeah, 40% of the year.
Your projections go from about 21 to 28%, I notice, future projections. But, you know, this is another area where the legislature sure hasn't given the budget commission any direction at all on how much. Give us a figure. What's a good, and every school's different, I understand.
Do you guys have one for the county?
No, we don't.
the only really statutory one
MRDD
that I
is the
know
only
is,
one,
and
and
that's
they say
40%.
40%. So, there you go.
That's only,
And you know, that's probably a comfort level with treasurer. Some treasurers say, I'm fine with 25%, other people say, oh, I gotta have 80%. It's probably a comfort level of the individual.
What's your squeal number?
It hasn't getting too low?
Yeah.
Like I said, I'd like to keep 3 months of cash on
I
hand.
realize that.
Which is.
Now, what's your squeal number?
Well, if I get down to 12%, I'm not sure I can,
You're not sleeping.
I can't sleep, yeah.
Understood.
You gotta have working capital.
I'm not saying that's our target. I'm saying I wanted to hear from you what your squeal number was.
Mine was a lot higher.
Well, it's okay.
He said squeal.
Because we're talking human capital.
Sure.
We start
Let me-
talking that, we're
Let me
talking.
again point out, though, that previous years, you had well over 100%. we're supposed to look at.
I know.
Yeah.
We're-
And,
Give us a
We're
good
putting-
definition
We're
of
putting
that,
references, my
which
folks
is
are,
unnecessary collection over the, what they say, I think it was, needed to provide services at statutorily required levels.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we need to have a better definition on that, but I just want to point that out. Yeah, okay, for a number of years you had excess, I think.
and when we came here last year, we clearly identified that, we knew that. We
Yeah.
talked about what our capital plan was to do with that. We said we were going to do these things.
We didn't accumulate, it was here when we got here.
So again, let me ask you, I'm just asking as one of the members here, but, you know, are you guys willing to, as Buckeye, willing to go back and consider reducing some of this excess, value you're getting in revenue from the reappraisals?
I think it'd be irresponsible to recommend that, so no, I'm not.
Okay.
thank you.
I want to move into public comment now from the public. Does anybody want to speak?
Yes,
from-
I do.
Okay. So here we're going to limit it to 5 minutes, and just state your name. You want an address? Just state your name and address for
All right,
Kristen over here, and you have the floor.
okay. My name's Jim Jebak, J-E-B as in Victor, A-C-K, 7271 Spieth Road.
Thank you.
In reference to the teacher-to-student ratio, I've taught for over 30 years in 2 different high schools. And I've seen the population go up. Teacher has been not considered in terms of number of students. But I've also seen the number of administrators. And if you read, I want to say, two issues ago, the Epic Times, which comes out of Washington, Chicago, and so forth, conservative paper, a big article that talks about administrators. And we have heard here only about teachers. In the schools that I've been in the last 5 or 6 years, there have been more administrators per student than there have been teachers. So the cost in terms of administrator is, from my perspective, is much greater than for a teacher. Because the administrators, maybe there aren't 100 in the school, and there are maybe 125 teachers. But I've observed over the years that there are more and more administrators and less teachers. And I don't know if it has to do with the profession itself, or if it has to do with the salaries that they receive. But I know it makes a big difference in what schools allocate for funds to keep the school going, especially from an educational, academic perspective.
Let me just share a piece of information with you. Asked, we were talking about student-to-teacher ratio, but we did ask, this board did ask for a number of information and different numbers, which is this sheet here that you provided us. And right here it does, we asked for the administrator-student ratio too. And just to give you what we thought, what we had been given for the last 3 years, starting in '23, it was 187 students to 1 administrator. In '24, the material that they supplied us 165 to 1, 148 in 25 to 1, and that's what they project to stay at for the next 3 years. Just so you know what we're looking at.
Right.
You still got 2 minutes left.
Well, I can only tell you what I've observed,
Okay.
what I've been experienced with. I knew there were a lot less administrators when I started back in 1965, and I realize that's 60-some years ago, whatever it is. And as I left education, I retired in '98, and I started substituting in Medina County, I've seen the number of administrators go up. And that I don't know what their function is most of the time, that they're there. I know when I left, one school went to another. I went to the program where you have to deal with academically with students who are challenged, and never got any counseling. Had to do it on my own. Now you go to somebody's specialty, take them out of class, meet with them so that they can, now I understand they need to be met with. But my point is that there are administrative people that from my perspective, aren't necessary to maintain an academically good, maybe even an excellent school for students to learn, to grow, and to deal with what they have to come out of once they've graduated from high school. And on top of that, there's this other things that they supposedly need to learn that have nothing to do with writing, reading, and arithmetic. And so all those extras, they're fancy, and they're also costly. So that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Melissa, please just state your name and address for the record, please.
I have a couple extra copies of this, but I definitely want to give you guys each one. Melissa Clifford from Litchfield Township, address 4310 Bryanton Road. So I am just going to be concerned about today. I'm not here to debate or be judicial whether they're spending it appropriate or whatever. I kind of want to hone in on what they're taking that is excessive over what the voters authorized. And as Treasurer Burke said about what is the statutory requirement, so if we could just go through this, I just want to leave this with you. So the first two changes in that position are